We're going to look at YCS Rio results, which happened this past weekend. The first YCS after Legacy of Destruction. It was a relatively small YCS. 378 duelists, and the Italian Open, 494 duelists. And I want to find out, you know, the exact impact that Legacy of Destruction had on the format. My biggest surprise when it came to YCS Rio was Melodious. They did go all the way until top 8 with pure Melodious. We're going to take a look at the list in a second, and I'm going to familiarize myself with some of the cards. I'm familiar with like Ostinato and the new cards, but I kind of want to understand what's going on here because it seems like it's more important to the format than I thought it was originally. But that's not the only thing why I want to take a look at Melodious, because if you look closer at some of these Snake Eye lists, 2 of those Snake Eye decks had Melodious cards in them. I want to take a look at that as well. Rafael Reich won YCS Rio with pure Snake Eye. Cash Tira Snake Eye, actually. 6 Snake Eye decks were in top 8. There was not a single Fire King Snake Eye in top 8. There was a Fire King Snake Eye in top 16, and there was another one in top 32, and that's it. I mean, we already had that suspicion, but it really feels like pure Snake Eye is still the way to go. The Snake Eye Melodious, you play Refrain, you play Couplet, and you play Ostinato and Concerto, and you play Baca or Baja and Schuberta. So Refrain is Pendulum Effect. Target a Melodious fusion you control. Send a Melodious monster from your deck to the graveyard. If you do, the targeted monster gains attack. You can only use this effect once per turn. Okay, I assume this is not the important effect. If this card is normal or special, you can add a Melodious from your deck to your hand. If a Melodious fusion is special to your field while this card is face up in your extra deck, you can place this card in your Pendulum Zone. Okay, so you summon this, then you fuse with it, and then it places itself in the Pendulum Zone to create skills. And then we have Couplet, which is only a one-off. That's the level 5 from Legacy of Destruction. You can't Pendulum except lights. If you do not control any face-up monsters other than Melodious, you can add a Melodious spell trap from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect of Couplet once per turn. If this card is added to your hand, except by drawing it for your normal draw, you can reveal this card, special summon a level 4 or lower Melodious from hand or grave. If a Melodious fusion monster is special summoned to your field while this card is in your extra deck, you can place this card in your Pendulum Zone. Okay. And then we have Ostinato, which is just if you control no monsters, it's branded fusion for Melodious, right? Using monsters from hand or deck as material during the end phase, destroy the fusion summoned monster. And if you do, special summon the fusion material. Okay. And then we have Melodious Concerto. Fusion summon a fairy fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand, field, and or Pendulum Zones. If a Melodious fusion is sent to your grave while this card is in your grave, even during the damage step, you can place it on the bottom of your deck, draw 1 card. You can only use each effect of Concerto once per turn. Okay. And then we have the 2 fusion monsters. While you control this fusion summoned card, the activated effects can't be negated. You can only use each effect once per turn. If this card is special, you can special summon a Melodious from your deck. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target a Melodious in your grave, special summon it in defense. And then we have this. During either player's turn, you can target up to 3 cards in any graveyards, banish them, and if you do, this card gains 200 attack for each. This can only be used once while this card is face up on them. Okay, so let me try to figure out what you do. You open Ostinato, and then you're fusion summoning Baja, right? I'm assuming you send double Refrain, because why would you want Couplet in the grave? And then Baja summons the 3rd Refrain from the deck. And then when this is normal or special, you add a Melodious monster from your deck to your hand. So you're gonna add Couplet. And then because this was added to your hand and you have these in the graveyard from this, you can bring this back from the graveyard, right? So from 1 Ostinato, you already get 2 Refrain on the field, a Baja on the field, and a Couplet in hand. This lets you make the Infernal Flame Banshee without normal summoning, which is obviously a generic way to search your Snake Eye Ash or your Poplar. I think it is worth mentioning this particular list chose to run only 2 Snake Eye Ash, which I think is interesting. How does this come into play here? How do we get access to the 1 Concerto? Oh, okay. We're not even done yet. We have Baja and 2 Refrains on the field and this in hand. Before we make Banshee, we scale the Couplet, and at the moment, we only control Melodious monsters, right? We can add the Concerto from the deck to the hand, and then we could use it if we wanted to make a Schuberta, right? To get like banishes from the graveyard, which is honestly a pretty good interruption, as well as this goes to the graveyard, so we can draw a card from it as well. That's pretty good for 1 Ostinato. How good is drawing 1 Refrain though? I'm talking about if you draw Refrain and not Ostinato. So you normal summon Refrain, grab Couplet, scale Couplet, Grab Concerto. Concerto fuse with the one from the field and the one in the scale to make Baja. Baja specials another refrain. The other two place themselves in the scale. These two make a link 2, and then this in the graveyard can trigger. You can send another target for it with refrain, right? You can refrain, send another refrain, and then you link 2, so you have a revive target for this. I don't know which link 2 you make. Maybe Haggard, and then you exceed the pendulum. Add a face-up pendulum from extra deck to your hand. To your main phase, you can special summon a pendulum from your hand to graveyard. Yeah. Okay. So you add like a bunch of level 4s back, and then you can pendulum summon them. Then you can make Apo and a rank 4. Okay, I see. Long story short, basically this deck is playing the Melodious cards as like alternative starters plus potential extenders plus ways to bait hand traps at the cost of having to go far over 40 cards, but also adding this card and this card, which don't do anything on their own. Ostinado is crazy on its own, like absolutely crazy. The refrain is good. I wouldn't say insane. It's kind of crazy to say that when it does Apo plus Banshee, but still, you'd rather just have Snake Eye Ash, I feel like. I don't know if you've thought about that, but you can't send refrain away for original, for example, because it needs to send to the graveyard, and you can't do that with pendulums, which can sometimes matter, right? I hate to say it, it reminds me a little bit of Super Heavy Samurai, these Melodious engines. Pure is another story. I don't think Pure Melodious is even close to the toxicity of like the Vakaushi stuff. I think Pure Melodious is a deck that I'm fine with. It's just the kind of stuff, it really makes me wish they put a harsher restriction on Ostinado. It's kind of weird how you can just add these cards to any deck and they can help you make like an Appaloosa plus a rank 4 in anything. In the archetype, I would have been fine with it. The way that the cards are being used here, on the one hand, cool and creative, and I mean that unironically, it is pretty creative to find this sort of stuff, especially because it hasn't been seen in the OCG at all. However, it gives me major Super Heavy Samurai vibes, like splashing Super Heavy Samurai in any deck to make like a rank 4. Does that ring a bell? Like the fact that you can just put a bunch of Vakaushis and whatever into whichever deck and just spam some rank 4s plus Baron or Appaloosa. It kind of does the same thing here. I'm not a fan of that, but they are definitely cards to be taken seriously, apparently. Is Ostinado already unobtainable? Oh no, Ostinado is fine. It's a common from Soul Fusion. Oh, it's not even that old. Dude, how does this not have restrictions on it? This is from 2019? Yeah, I know about first movement solo. Yeah, good lord. Oh god, man, stop. For the engine, you don't need the first movement solo. You only need the first movement solo for the pure deck, right? So at least that's worth something. Can you Ghost Bell Ostinado? I think so, because it has the second effect that summons from the graveyard in the end phase. So yes, you should be able to Bell Ostinado, but your opponent just activates another one, right? Because it doesn't say you can only use one per turn. They'll just activate their second Ostinado, and what do you do then? So that's my main takeaway from YCS Rio, is really the performance of the Melodious cards, both in the pure form and in Snake Eyes. Other than that, we have Snake Eyes as the best performing deck by far, not really surprising. We have Tenpai Dragon. Once again, I'll happily repeat myself, Tenpai Dragon is doing here what it does best, which is performing, but not overperforming, right? It's performing in like the third most successful category, to the level where it's expected, but it's not like something that people will like main deck for or whatever, right? It's the kind of deck where most people are going to put some cards against Tenpai in their side deck, and it wants to be in this position. It did, however, do a little bit better in the Italian Open. However, the Italian Open, while it was a bigger tournament, it was Swiss rounds only. It didn't have a top cut, so it's harder to say what would have happened if those Tenpais had to play elimination matches. On top of the fact that the Snake Eye players were the ones that actually took first and second place, it seems like the kind of deck that's very well equipped to go X1 or X11, whereas the ones that went undefeated were still the Snake Eye players. But still, a good showing for Tenpai, I would say, between the two big tournaments that happened last weekend. And then we had a bunch of other decks showing up. Voiceless Voice with a good performance, honestly. The one thing that's worth pointing out about Voiceless Voice is that they had 5 people in top 32 and they had no one who made it into the top 8. I think that also does make sense, in my opinion. Voiceless Voice seems to be a deck deck that can really carry you through the Swiss rounds relatively well, you know, like a X1, X2 kind of thing seems very doable with Voiceless Voice. As soon as you hit those elimination rounds, though, I think it gets a little bit harder when you have to win out. They were the second most represented deck in top 32, but they fell off hard going into top 16 and top 8 and so on. But it's still a good showing for Voiceless Voice. We have Emre representing Fluanderies in top 16. Is the only one, though. No one does it with the birds like Emre does, I suppose. Branded, I was expecting more than just one in top 32. There's one in the Italian Open as well. And the same for Pearly, one here and one here. I would classify that as underperforming. Maybe one thing that is worth pointing out with Branded is that one card that people are doing, right? And I think that goes for both decks, actually, Branded and Pearly, right? Which are both solid decks, but I think they get randomly like hate crimed at the moment because one card of choice versus Tenpai Dragon is D-Barrier. That card just destroys Pearly and it destroys Branded. So I think that's a big issue for when you're playing those decks. One thing that I guess is worth talking about, something that I also wasn't really expecting, mainly because I was going off of OCG again, where in the OCG, this card didn't see play. In the TCG, this card is seeing play at the moment, and that is Snake Eyes Diabellstar. When an attack is declared involving this card and an opponent's monster, you can place this card from the field and that opponent's monster face up on its owner's spell and trap zones. While this card is a continuous spell, you can target a fire in your grave, place it in the spell and trap zone, and if you do special summon this card, you can only use each effect once per turn. All the pure decks in OCG play it, they just mainly play Fire King. Oh, okay, maybe that's the reason. Maybe they are playing it in the OCG, but I've seen a lot of Fire King decks and not the pure decks. Okay, my bad. Whatever the reason for it was, I didn't expect this card to see a lot of play, but I also haven't looked into its possibilities that much. It did fly under my radar. The coolest thing about this card for me personally is that it can turn Divine Temple into an extender, because you just put this in the spell and trap zone and then you can basically swap it with anything from your grave while this summons itself, which is pretty cool. And once you have it in the graveyard, if you ever enter like a grindy game because hand traps are flying back and forth, you can always put it back with Poplar for an extra summon every turn. I'm seeing number 38 in the extra deck here. There seems to be a turn 1 combo where you can overlay into Harbinger with the Snake Eye Diabellstar and the Snake Eyes Flamberge Dragon. I don't know what the exact line for that is, I'm afraid, but this is a great way to make Appaloosa and then not immediately die to talents or a change of heart because you have a spell negator on the field. Once again, long story short, Baron and Savage Band were good. There's still replacements, and there is still a long way to go when it goes to like addressing Snake Eyes on the Forbidden and Limited list. It feels like we play Protect the Appo now. Dude, it's almost as if Appaloosa is a ban-worthy card as well. That's crazy. I think Appaloosa might get the same treatment as Baron, is my personal prediction, because Baron got banned a couple months after its Rarity Collection reprint. I think it's likely that it has the same fate. Maybe not the next ban list, but I think at some point Appaloosa might be the next big extra deck monster that goes. That's the format right now. Going into the national season, there is still some experimentation to be done, but this is what it's looking like. Slightly different versions of Snake Eye at the top. I will say at this point, Fire King Snake Eye is like literally barely putting up numbers. I would say it's been established that pure Snake Eye is the way to go. I think it's a lot more fun than pure Snake Eye, but it's definitely not better. Have you noticed the Metal Tronus hype? I'm not surprised. This card is good. I like it a lot. It's a very flexible removal. We can out IP Masquerena, we can out SP, we can out Harbinger. I think it's especially good against Appaloosa because you go Metal Tronus, negate their Appaloosa, summon your own Appaloosa, and you just don't banish, so you can make a Zelantis for free, basically. It's like summon Zelantis and negate Appo. That's pretty good. That's the other thing. It's a great card going first as well, right? You can just like negate everything they do, pretty much. I'm kind of surprised it's seeing side deck play only, because I think if you think it's good in the format, this is a card you might as well main deck. I guess it's not a hand trap, so it doesn't quite fit your approach. And it also doesn't help you play through hand traps when you go first. Those are my impressions from YCS Rio and the Italian Open. I think that is a solid baseline to go off of into national format. For me, it's gonna depend, because on the one hand, I said it earlier, I want to take nationals seriously. On the other hand, I've played a little bit of pure Snake Eye. I really don't enjoy the hand trap heavy mirror matches. I'm gonna try and see if there's a different option for me. I'm gonna try my hardest not to play Snake Eyes at German nationals. We still have 1.5 months. I can't promise that I will be successful at finding something. The current iteration of Snake Eyes, I just don't enjoy. And sometimes that does play a factor for me because sometimes I'm just like so much less motivated to try and deck build and innovate and learn or improve at playing a deck that I don't enjoy. So sometimes it can even be better for me to play something that I just like, because then I'll get better with it and find better lists or innovate more and stuff like that, but we'll see. But I do think it's looking like Snake Eye is going to be the best deck for Nationals. I mean, that's not a surprise, right?